I was 22 when I met Daniel. He had these warm brown eyes that made me feel safe, like nothing bad could ever happen as long as he was there. We met at a coffee shop where I was studying for my nursing exams. He spilled his coffee on my notes, apologized 100 times, and insisted on buying me dinner to make up for it. That dinner turned into breakfast. Breakfast turned into a year of the happiest moments of my life. He proposed on the same bench where we had our first kiss. I said yes before he even finished the question. But there was always a shadow over our happiness. Her name was Margaret, Daniel's mother. From the very first time we met, I knew she didn't approve of me. It wasn't anything she said directly at first. It was the way she looked at me. Like I was something stuck to the bottom of her expensive shoe. At family dinners, she would ask me questions designed to make me feel small. So, Sarah, you're still in school. Daniel's previous girlfriend was already a doctor. Or, I hope you understand that our family has certain standards to maintain. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table, whisper that I shouldn't let her get to me. But how could I not? This woman made it crystal clear that I wasn't good enough for her son, that I didn't come from the right family, didn't have the right education, didn't wear the right clothes. Margaret came from old money. Her late husband had left her very comfortable. She lived in a mansion, drove a luxury car, and treated everyone around her like servants. When Daniel told her we were getting engaged, she didn't congratulate us. She cried. Not tears of joy, tears of disappointment. She begged Daniel to reconsider, told him he was throwing his life away. "You can do so much better," she said, looking straight at me. "This girl is just after your money." I'll never forget the coldness in her voice. Daniel defended me. He said he loved me, and that was all that mattered. But I saw something break in Margaret's eyes that day. It wasn't sadness. It was anger. We got married anyway, in a small ceremony. Margaret came, but she sat in the back row with her arms crossed, wearing black like she was attending a funeral. She didn't smile once. Not during the vows, not during our first dance, not when Daniel kissed me and everyone cheered. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, I felt her hatred burning into my back. When we cut the cake, she left without saying goodbye. The first 6 months of marriage were beautiful, despite her. Daniel and I moved into a house that his family owned, a lovely place with a garden and big windows that let in the morning sun. We talked about our future, about the kids we wanted, about growing old together. He made me feel like I could survive anything as long as we were together. But Margaret never stopped trying to poison our relationship. She would call Daniel constantly, crying about how lonely she was, how she was getting old and had nobody. She would show up uninvited, criticize how I decorated our home, how I cooked, how I dressed. "Daniel deserves someone who knows how to host properly," she said once, running her finger along a shelf and inspecting it for dust. I bit my tongue so many times it's a miracle I didn't bite it off. But I stayed quiet because I loved Daniel, and I didn't want to put him in a position where he had to choose between his mother and his wife. I thought that maybe, one day, she would see that I truly loved her son, that I made him happy, that I was good enough. I was so naive. I really believed that time would change things, that when we had children, Margaret would soften, that becoming a grandmother would open her heart. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come, that the woman who already hated me would soon have the power to destroy everything I had left. If you've ever loved someone whose family rejected you, you know this pain. Like this video, so I know I'm not alone in this. 3 months after our wedding, I started feeling different. Tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, emotional over the smallest things. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work, my hands shaking as I paid for it. I took it in our bathroom, Daniel still at work, and watched as those 2 pink lines appeared. I was pregnant. I sank to the floor and cried, but they were happy tears. Scared tears, yes, but mostly happy. We were going to be parents. When Daniel came home that evening, I had the test wrapped in a little box with a note that said, "You're going to be a daddy." He opened it at the dinner table, stared at it for a moment, and then his eyes filled with tears. He picked me up and spun me around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, like he couldn't believe it. "We're really having a baby." That night, we stayed up late talking about names, about what kind of parents we wanted to be, about how our child would be so loved. We decided to wait a few more weeks before telling anyone. I wanted to get past the first trimester, to make sure everything was okay. But Daniel was so excited he could barely contain himself. "My mom is going to be a grandmother," he said one night, holding my still flat belly. "Maybe this will change things between you two. Maybe she'll finally see how perfect you are for me." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that a grandchild would soften Margaret's heart, that she would look at me differently once she knew I was carrying her son's baby. We never got the chance to tell her. It was a Wednesday evening, October 15th. I remember the date because it's burned into my brain like a scar that never fades. Daniel had stayed late at work to finish a project. He texted me around 8 saying he was on his way home, that he loved me, that he couldn't wait to see me. Those were the last words I ever received from him. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't Daniel. It was a police officer asking if I was Sarah Mitchell, if I was married to Daniel Mitchell. The words that came next didn't make sense. Accident. Highway. Another driver ran a red light. They did everything they could. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Loss? What loss? Daniel was coming home. He was going to walk through that door any minute and kiss my forehead like he always did. This had to be a mistake. Some terrible, cruel mistake. But it wasn't. My husband, the father of my unborn child, the love of my life, was gone. Just like that. In a split second, everything I had built, everything I dreamed of, shattered into a million pieces. The funeral was 3 days later. I barely remember it. I was numb, moving through it like a ghost. I wore a black dress that was already getting tight around my waist because of the pregnancy nobody knew about yet. Margaret was there, dressed in designer black, her face covered by a veil, surrounded by friends offering condolences. People kept coming up to me saying things like, "He's in a better place," and "Time heals all wounds." But I didn't want time. I wanted my husband back. I wanted Daniel to hold me and tell me this was all just a nightmare. At the burial, I stood at the edge of his grave, my hand on my stomach, and whispered to our baby, "Your daddy loved you so much. He would have been the best father." Margaret stood on the other side of the grave, supported by 2 friends. For a moment, our eyes met across Daniel's casket. I thought I saw something there, maybe shared grief, maybe a truce. I thought that losing Daniel would bring us together in our pain, that she would realize we were both devastated, that we both loved him, that we needed each other now. After the service, I approached her carefully. "Margaret," I said softly, "I know this is the hardest day of both our lives, but I want you to know that you're not alone. We have each other now." She looked at me with empty eyes, said nothing, and turned away. Her friends ushered her to a car, and she left without another word. I told myself she was just in shock, that grief makes people act strange. I told myself that once the initial pain faded a little, we would talk, that I would tell her about the baby, and that would give her something to live for. A piece of Daniel still alive in this world. I was 3 months pregnant, widowed, and about to lose everything. But I didn't know that yet. I thought the worst had already happened. Tell me in the comments, have you ever lost everything in a single moment? 3 days after we buried Daniel, I was still living in a fog. I hadn't eaten properly, hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. The house felt enormous and empty without him. Every corner reminded me of him. His coffee mug still in the sink, his jacket hanging by the door, his side of the bed untouched because I couldn't bear to disturb it. I spent most of my time curled up on the couch, crying until I had no tears left, then crying some more. I was wearing one of Daniel's old shirts, sitting in the dark, when I heard a knock at the door. It was late morning, but I had lost track of time. I opened it to find Margaret standing there, perfectly composed in a black pantsuit, her hair styled, her makeup flawless. She wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone I didn't recognize, holding a briefcase. "We need to talk," Margaret said, walking past me into my home without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door, confused. "Margaret, what's going on? Who is this?" The man introduced himself as her attorney. My stomach dropped. Why would she bring a lawyer to my house 3 days after her son's funeral? "Please sit down, Sarah," Margaret said, but there was no kindness in her voice. It was cold, businesslike. I sat, and she remained standing, looking down at me like I was something she needed to deal with. "This house," she began, gesturing around, "is family property. It belonged to my late husband, then to Daniel, and now it reverts back to the family estate. My estate." I stared at her, not understanding. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me without a trace of emotion. "I'm saying you need to leave. This is not your house. It never was. Daniel is gone, and you have no legal claim to any of this." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Margaret, I just lost my husband, your son. Can we please talk about this later? I can't think about houses and property right now." She crossed her arms. "There's nothing to discuss. The property is mine. You have 1 week to vacate." 1 week. She was giving me 1 week to pack up my entire life and leave the only home I had. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "I have nowhere to go. Please, Margaret. I know we've never gotten along, but I'm grieving too. I loved Daniel more than anything in this world." She tilted her head slightly, and what she said next, I will never forget for as long as I live. "You trapped my son with your pregnancy. Don't think I didn't know. Daniel told me everything before he died." My blood went cold. How did she know? Daniel and I hadn't told anyone yet. "He called me that day," Margaret continued, excited, saying he was going to be a father. He wanted my blessing. "I told him he was making another mistake, that you probably got pregnant on purpose to secure your place in this family. And now he's dead, and you're here, carrying a child that will tie you to us forever. Well, I won't have it." I couldn't breathe. She knew about my baby. She knew, and she didn't care. "This is your grandchild," I said, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. "Your son's child. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Margaret's face twisted into something ugly. "It means you used pregnancy as a trap, just like I knew you would. My son is gone because he was distracted, rushing home to you, probably thinking about this baby instead of paying attention to the road. And now you think you can stay here, live off my family's money, raise a child on my dime? That's not fair," I sobbed. "Daniel loved me. We wanted this baby. This wasn't a trap. It was our dream." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Dreams are over, Sarah. Reality is this. You are nothing to this family. You never were. You were a mistake Daniel made, and now that he's gone, there's no reason for you to be here. Take your baby and leave. You have 1 week." The lawyer handed me an envelope with eviction papers. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold it. "Please," I begged. "Please don't do this. I'm pregnant. I have no family, no savings, nowhere to go. Just give me time." Margaret put on her sunglasses, preparing to leave. "You should have thought about that before you got pregnant. You're a grown woman. Figure it out. And Sarah," she paused at the door, "don't contact me again. As far as I'm concerned, you and that child don't exist." She walked out, leaving me alone in a house that was no longer mine, carrying a baby that would never know its father, abandoned by the only family I had left. I collapsed on the floor and screamed until my throat was raw. I was 3 months pregnant, widowed, homeless, and completely alone. The woman who should have been my family had just thrown me away like garbage. If you felt this betrayal deep in your soul, follow my story, because what happened next? I had 7 days to pack up my life and leave. 7 days to figure out where a pregnant, grieving widow with no family and barely any savings was supposed to go. I spent the first 2 days in complete paralysis, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes I couldn't bring myself to fill. Everything in that house was a memory of Daniel. How was I supposed to choose what to keep when all I wanted was to keep him? But on the 3rd day, something shifted inside me. I was lying in bed, my hand on my barely showing belly, and I felt it. Not a kick, it was too early for that, but a flutter. A tiny reminder that I wasn't completely alone. There was a life inside me depending on me to survive. And in that moment, I made a decision. I could either let Margaret's cruelty destroy me, or I could fight. For my baby. For Daniel's memory. For myself. I found a tiny studio apartment on the other side of town. It was in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place I never thought I'd live. The building was old, the walls were paper thin, and there was a water stain on the ceiling that looked like it might cave in any day. But it was all I could afford. The deposit took almost everything I had saved. When I moved in with my few boxes of belongings, I sat on the bare floor of that empty apartment and cried. This was my life now. This was what Margaret had reduced me to. I needed money. Fast. My nursing degree was only halfway finished, and I couldn't afford to continue school right now. So I took the first job I could find, waitressing at a diner downtown. The hours were brutal, the pay was terrible, and I was on my feet all day while pregnant. My ankles swelled so badly that I could barely fit into my shoes by the end of each shift. The smell of grease made my morning sickness worse. I would run to the bathroom to throw up, then come back out and serve customers with a smile plastered on my face. My coworkers were kind, but they didn't understand. How could they? They would complain about their boyfriends or their rent, normal problems, while I was carrying a dead man's baby and trying not to fall apart. During my breaks, I would sit in my car and talk to Daniel like he was still there. "I'm so tired," I would whisper. "I don't know if I can do this. I need you here. Our baby needs you here." But he never answered, and I would have to wipe my tears and go back inside. The loneliness was suffocating. I had no family. My friends from before had drifted away after Daniel died, not knowing what to say to me, and I was too proud to ask for help. At night, in that tiny apartment, I would lie awake listening to my neighbors fighting through the walls, and wonder how my life had fallen apart so completely. I was 4 months pregnant, working 12-hour shifts, living in poverty, while Margaret was probably in her mansion, sleeping in silk sheets, not giving a single thought to the grandchild she had abandoned. But something inside me refused to break. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was anger. Or maybe it was the fierce, primal love I already felt for my unborn baby. I started researching online nursing programs I could do from home. I found scholarships for single mothers. I applied for every grant, every aid program, every opportunity I could find. When I came home exhausted from the diner, I would study until midnight. I would fall asleep with textbooks on my chest and wake up at 5 to do it all again. My pregnancy progressed, and I faced every milestone alone. The first ultrasound where I found out I was having a girl. I lay on that cold table, looking at the screen, watching my daughter's tiny heartbeat, and there was no one there to hold my hand. No Daniel to cry happy tears with me, no excited grandmother waiting in the lobby, just me and a technician who printed out a photo and moved on to the next patient. I taped that ultrasound picture to my bathroom mirror and talked to it every morning. "We're going to be okay," I promised my daughter. "I don't know how, but we will." I worked until I was 8 months pregnant. My manager told me I should stop, that I looked ready to drop, but I needed every dollar. My feet were so swollen I could only wear slippers. My back ached constantly. Customers would look at me with pity, this heavily pregnant woman carrying trays of food, and I hated it. I didn't want pity. I wanted my husband back. I wanted a life where I didn't have to choose between resting and paying rent. One night I came home and found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was $200 in cash and a note that said, "For the baby. Hang in there." It was from Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who lived across the hall. I had helped her carry groceries once, and she must have noticed how I struggled. I sat on my floor and sobbed, overwhelmed by the kindness of a stranger when my own family had abandoned me. That money bought diapers and baby clothes from the thrift store. I was building a life from nothing, brick by brick, despite everything trying to tear me down. My daughter was going to be born into poverty, into a broken world, but she would be born into love. Fierce, unbreakable love. That was something Margaret's money could never buy. Share this with someone who's fighting their own battle right now. We all need to know we're not alone. I went into labor 3 weeks early, on a cold January morning. I woke up at 4 a.m. with a pain so sharp it took my breath away. At first, I thought it was just Braxton Hicks, the false contractions I'd been having for weeks. But then another wave hit, stronger, and I knew. This was real. My baby was coming and I was completely alone. I grabbed my hospital bag, the one I'd packed weeks ago, and called a taxi because I had no one to drive me. The driver kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, nervous, probably terrified I was going to give birth in his back seat. "Hold on, lady," he kept saying. "We're almost there." I gripped the door handle and breathed through the contractions, thinking about how Daniel should have been here, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. The hospital was bright and cold. A nurse took me to a room, helped me change into a gown, and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Is someone coming to be with you? Your husband? Your mother? A friend?" I shook my head, tears already streaming down my face. "No, there's no one. I'm alone." She squeezed my hand gently. "You're not alone, honey. We're here with you." But it wasn't the same, and we both knew it. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain so intense I thought I might die. 14 hours of screaming and crying and begging for it to be over. Between contractions, I thought about Margaret, comfortable in her mansion, probably having lunch with friends, completely unaware that her grandchild was being born. Or maybe she knew and simply didn't care. That thought hurt worse than the contractions. At 6:47 p.m., my daughter came into this world screaming. The doctor placed her on my chest, this tiny, perfect, red-faced creature, and I forgot every bit of pain. She had Daniel's eyes. Even though all babies have blue eyes at birth, I swear I saw him in her face. "Emma," I whispered, the name Daniel and I had chosen together months ago. "Emma Grace Mitchell. Your daddy would have loved you so much." I held her and cried, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of overwhelming love mixed with devastating grief. Daniel should have been here. He should have been cutting the umbilical cord, taking 1,000 pictures, calling everyone he knew to announce our daughter's arrival. Instead, it was just me and a room full of strangers. A nurse took a photo of us with my phone, mother and daughter, both of us exhausted, both of us survivors. That night, after the nurses had cleaned Emma and brought her back to me, I sat in the hospital bed with my phone in my hand. I stared at Margaret's number for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to erase her from our lives completely. But another part, the part that still hoped for humanity in people, thought maybe this would change things. Maybe seeing a photo of her granddaughter would break through that wall of ice around her heart. I typed out a message. "Your granddaughter was born today. Her name is Emma Grace. She has Daniel's eyes. She's beautiful and healthy. I thought you'd want to know." I attached the photo the nurse had taken, me with messy hair and exhausted eyes, holding this perfect tiny baby. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before I pressed it. Then I waited. Hours passed. The nurses came in to check on us, to help me with breastfeeding, to teach me how to change a diaper. My phone sat on the table beside me, silent. No response. By morning, still nothing. No congratulations. No, I'm glad she's healthy. Not even a cold, formal acknowledgement. Just silence. Margaret had received the message. I could see it was delivered, but she chose to say nothing. Over the next few weeks, I tried twice more. I sent another photo of Emma sleeping. No response. I sent a message on what would have been Daniel's birthday. Emma smiled today. I wish you could see her. She's growing so fast. Nothing. It was like shouting into a void. Margaret had made her choice. She wanted nothing to do with us. After that third ignored message, something inside me hardened. I realized I had been holding on to false hope, waiting for a woman who had proven over and over that she had no love to give. Emma and I didn't need her. We didn't need her money, her approval, or her presence in our lives. I deleted Margaret's number from my phone. If she ever changed her mind, she would have to find us. I was done begging for crumbs of affection from someone who saw us as nothing. Those first months with Emma were the hardest of my life. I was healing from childbirth, sleep-deprived, and trying to figure out how to keep a tiny human alive on almost no money. I went back to work at the diner when Emma was 6 weeks old because my maternity leave, what little I had, was unpaid, and we needed food. Mrs. Chen from across the hall watched Emma during my shifts, refusing to take more than $20 a day, even though I knew professional childcare cost 3 times that. I would come home smelling like grease and coffee, my breasts leaking milk through my uniform, and find Emma sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Chen's arms. "She's an angel," Mrs. Chen would say. "Never cries, just like you, always trying to be strong." I would take my daughter, hold her close, and cry into her soft hair. Some days the weight of doing this alone felt like it would crush me. But Emma gave me purpose. Every time I wanted to give up, I would look at her, this innocent life that depended on me. And I would find strength I didn't know I had. She deserved better than this tiny apartment and a mother who was falling apart. So I kept studying, kept working, kept fighting. For her. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had? The years that followed Emma's birth were a blur of survival and slow, painful growth. When Emma turned 1, I was still working at the diner, still living in that cramped studio apartment, still struggling to make ends meet. But I had also completed 2 years of online nursing courses. I studied during Emma's naps, late at night after she went to bed, on my lunch breaks at work. My textbooks were covered in coffee stains and baby formula. My notes had crayon scribbles in the margins from when Emma got hold of them. I graduated with my nursing degree when Emma was 3. I walked across that stage in a borrowed cap and gown, with Emma sitting in the audience next to Mrs. Chen, clapping her tiny hands and yelling, "Mama!" I didn't have family there. I didn't have Daniel. But I had my daughter and a handful of friends who had become my chosen family. And that day, holding my diploma, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Getting my nursing license changed everything. I got a job at a hospital, working night shifts in the emergency room. The pay was 3 times what I made at the diner. For the first time since Daniel died, I could breathe. I could buy groceries without counting every penny. I could take Emma to the doctor without panicking about the copay. After 2 years of saving every extra dollar, I put a down payment on a small 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. The day we moved in, Emma was 5 years old. She ran through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing, shouting, "This is my room! This is our home!" I stood in the kitchen, boxes stacked around me, and cried. We had made it. Against every odd. Against Margaret's cruelty. Against poverty and grief and loneliness. We had built something. It wasn't much, this modest apartment with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting. But it was ours. Emma grew into the most incredible child. She was smart, curious, always asking questions that made me think. She had Daniel's sense of humor, his kindness, his way of making everyone around him feel special. She made friends easily at school, loved reading and drawing, and had a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Looking at her was like looking at a miracle. This beautiful, happy child had come from so much pain. I built a life for us, piece by piece. I made friends with other single mothers at Emma's school. We formed a support network, watching each other's kids, sharing meals, helping with homework. There was Maria, whose husband had left her with 3 kids. There was Jennifer, who had escaped an abusive marriage. There was Ashley, whose partner had died of cancer. We were all warriors, all survivors, and we understood each other in a way no one else could. On weekends, I would take Emma to the park, to the library, to free museums. We didn't have money for fancy vacations or expensive toys, but we had each other. I read to her every night, the same way Daniel had read to me when I was pregnant, his hand on my belly, talking to our daughter before she was born. Your daddy loved stories, I told Emma. He would have read to you every single night. Emma knew about Daniel. I made sure of that. His photos were all over our apartment. I told her stories about him constantly. How he proposed, how excited he was when he found out about her, how he would have been the best father in the world. Why did Daddy have to die? She asked me once when she was 6. I held her close and told her the truth. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, but Daddy loved you so much, even though he never got to meet you. And he's watching over us from heaven. She never asked about Margaret. She never asked why she didn't have grandparents on her father's side. I had made the decision early on not to poison her with that story. What good would it do to tell a child that her grandmother had rejected her before she was even born? That she had been deemed unworthy of love by someone who should have cherished her? So I focused on the family we did have, Mrs. Chen, who Emma called Grandma Chen, and the community of friends who showed up for us. By the time Emma turned 7, I had been promoted to charge nurse. I was working day shifts now, which meant I could be there for Emma's school events, her parent-teacher conferences, her birthday parties. I watched her blow out candles on her 7th birthday cake, surrounded by friends, and I thought about how far we had come. 7 years ago, I was alone in a hospital room, terrified and broken. Now I was strong. Now I was stable. Now I was proud of the life I had built. But there was still a scar that never fully healed. Late at night, after Emma was asleep, I would sometimes think about Margaret. I wondered if she ever thought about us, if she ever regretted throwing away her only connection to her son, if she ever lay awake wondering what her granddaughter looked like, what kind of person she was becoming. Part of me hoped she did. Part of me hoped the guilt ate her alive. I had achieved something Margaret never thought I could. I had survived without her money, without her family name, without any of the things she believed made someone worthy. I had raised a beautiful, kind, intelligent daughter on my own. I had built a career, a home, a life. And I had done it all without her. That was my victory, quiet but absolute. Emma was thriving. I was thriving. We had everything we needed. But deep down, in a place I rarely acknowledged, there was still anger, still hurt, still a wound that Margaret had inflicted that never quite closed. I told myself it didn't matter, that we were better off without her, that her rejection had made us stronger. And most days I believed it. But life has a way of bringing the past back when you least expect it. And Margaret's silence was about to end in a way I never could have imagined. Like this video, if you've ever built something beautiful from the ashes of your pain. Emma had just turned 8. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in the hospital break room finishing my shift notes when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, too many spam calls, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was fate. "Hello?" I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued writing. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in 8 years. "Sarah? It's Margaret." I froze. The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the table. My heart started racing, not with excitement, but with something closer to dread. Why, after 8 years of silence, was she calling me now? "Margaret," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I'm surprised you still have my number." "I know I have no right to call," she said, and her voice sounded different, older, weaker. The sharp, commanding tone I remembered was gone, replaced by something almost fragile. "But I need to talk to you. In person. Please. It's important." Important? What could possibly be important after 8 years of pretending we didn't exist? "Why?" I asked bluntly. "Why now? You had 8 years to reach out. 8 years to meet your granddaughter. You chose silence." "I know," she said, and I heard something break in her voice. Was she crying? "I know I don't deserve your time, but please, Sarah, I'm begging you, just one conversation. I'll explain everything." Part of me wanted to hang up, to give her the same silence she had given us. But curiosity and something else, maybe the small part of me that had never stopped hoping for an apology, made me agree. "Fine. One conversation. There's a coffee shop on Maple Street. Tomorrow at 2. Don't be late." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. A coworker asked if I was okay, and I lied and said yes. But I wasn't okay. That phone call had ripped open wounds I thought had scarred over. What could Margaret possibly want after all this time? Money? No, she had always been the one with money. To meet Emma? After abandoning her? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. That night I barely slept. I kept imagining the conversation, planning what I would say, how I would protect myself and Emma from whatever this was. I thought about not showing up, about standing her up the way she had stood us up for 8 years of birthdays and holidays. But I knew I would go. I needed to know what she wanted. I needed to look her in the eye and see if there was any remorse there. The next day, I dropped Emma at school and headed to the coffee shop. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a tea I didn't drink, just to have something to do with my hands. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened and Margaret walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman I remembered was elegant, perfectly put together, radiating wealth and superiority. This woman looked like a shadow of that person. She had aged dramatically. Her hair, once professionally colored and styled, was now gray and thin, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, things I never would have imagined Margaret wearing. She had lost weight, too much weight, and her face looked drawn and tired, but it was her eyes that shocked me most. They were haunted, desperate. She spotted me and walked over slowly, like she was unsure of her welcome. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, sliding into the chair across from me. Up close, she looked even worse. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she set her purse on the table. This was not the Margaret who had thrown me out 8 years ago. This was someone who had been broken by something. "You look different," I said, not bothering to make it sound kind. She laughed, but it was bitter. "I imagine I do. A lot has changed." She ordered black coffee from the waitress, nothing fancy, and I noticed her wallet when she paid. It was old and worn, not the designer leather I remembered. What had happened to her? We sat in uncomfortable silence until her coffee arrived. Then she took a deep breath and said the words I never expected to hear. "I need your help, Sarah. I have nowhere else to turn." help. After everything she had done, after throwing me and my unborn child onto the street, after 8 years of pretending we didn't exist, she wanted my help. I felt anger rising in my chest like a wave. "You need my help?" I repeated slowly. "That's why you called? After 8 years?" She nodded and a tear rolled down her cheek. I had never seen Margaret cry before, not even at Daniel's funeral. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "The house, the money, everything. I made a terrible mistake, trusted the wrong person, invested everything I had with someone I thought was a friend. It was all a scam. I lost it all. The bank foreclosed on the house 6 months ago. I'm living in a rented room now, barely making rent with my Social Security. And Sarah?" Her voice dropped even lower. "I'm sick. I need treatment I can't afford." I stared at her, processing this information. Margaret, who had wielded her wealth like a weapon, who had made me feel worthless because I had nothing, was now the one with nothing. The irony was almost too much. "And you think I should help you?" I asked, my voice hard. "After what you did to me? To Emma?" She looked down at her coffee. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I was cruel. I was wrong about everything." "You were more than cruel," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You threw me out when I was pregnant and grieving. You ignored your granddaughter's birth. You pretended we didn't exist for 8 years. And now you show up because you need something?" My hands were clenched into fists under the table. Margaret was crying openly now, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I'm just asking for help. I'm desperate, Sarah. I have no one else. No friends left, no family. Just you. And Emma. My granddaughter I've never met." The way she said Emma's name made something twist in my chest. She had no right to claim that connection. No right at all. Follow my story because what I did next will surprise you. I sat there, staring at this broken woman across from me, and I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Satisfaction? Pity? All of it swirled together in my chest until I could barely breathe. "Tell me everything," I said finally. "If you want my help, I need to know exactly what happened, and why you think you deserve anything from me after what you did." Margaret wiped her eyes with a napkin, her hands still shaking. "After Daniel died, I was consumed by grief and anger. I blamed you for everything. In my mind, if he hadn't met you, if you hadn't gotten pregnant, he wouldn't have been rushing home that night. He'd still be alive. It was easier to hate you than to accept that it was just a terrible accident, that sometimes life is cruel and random and unfair." "So you punished me for your pain," I said coldly. "You threw a pregnant widow onto the street because you needed someone to blame." She nodded, shame written across her face. "Yes, I was hateful. I was so deep in my own grief that I couldn't see yours. I couldn't see that you had lost just as much as I had. More, even. You lost your future, your partner, your security. And I made it worse. You made it hell," I corrected her. "Do you have any idea what those years were like? Working until my feet bled while pregnant? Giving birth alone? Raising Emma in poverty while you lived in your mansion? I sent you pictures of your granddaughter, and you couldn't even respond. Not even a single word." Margaret's face crumpled. "I know, I saw every photo. I kept them all. But I was too proud, too stubborn to reach out. I told myself I didn't need you or that baby in my life." "Her name is Emma," I said sharply. "She's not that baby. She's your granddaughter. She's 8 years old. She's brilliant and kind and funny. And she's never even heard your name because I refused to tell her about the grandmother who rejected her before she was born." Margaret flinched like I had slapped her. "I deserve that. I deserve all of your anger." "You deserve more than anger," I said, my voice trembling. "You deserve to feel every bit of the pain you caused me. So tell me, how did the mighty Margaret end up broken alone? I want to hear it all." She took a shaky breath and continued. About 3 years ago, I met someone at my country club, Richard. He was charming, well-dressed, said he was a financial advisor. We became friends. He talked about investments, opportunities, ways to grow wealth. I was lonely, and he paid attention to me, made me feel important again. I could see where this was going. You gave him your money. She nodded miserably. He said he had an investment opportunity, a development project that would triple my money in 2 years. It sounded perfect. I trusted him. I invested everything, the savings, the house equity, everything. For a year, I got statements showing incredible returns. Then one day he disappeared. The phone number was disconnected. The office was empty. The whole thing was fake. A Ponzi scheme, I said. She nodded again. By the time I realized what happened, it was too late. Everything was gone. I tried to get the money back, hired lawyers, but there was nothing left to recover. Richard, if that was even his real name, had vanished with millions from dozens of victims. The bank foreclosed on my house. I had to sell everything just to survive. All the jewelry, the furniture, the art, gone. Part of me felt vindicated. Margaret had finally learned what it was like to lose everything. But I didn't feel as satisfied as I thought I would. And the health issues? I asked. Her face paled even more. I've been having heart problems. I need medication, regular monitoring, possibly surgery eventually. I'm on Medicare, but it doesn't cover everything. My prescriptions alone cost $300 a month, and I'm living on $1,200 in Social Security. After rent and food, there's nothing left. So you need money, I said flatly. That's why you're here. You need me to pay for your medical care. She looked at me with those haunted eyes. I know how it sounds. I know it looks like I only reached out because I need something. And maybe that's partly true. But Sarah, lying alone in that tiny room at night, facing the possibility that I might die soon, I've had time to think. To really think about what I did. About the family I destroyed because of my pride and my anger. You didn't destroy a family, I said coldly. Emma and I are a family. We built that without you. What you destroyed was your chance to be part of it. Margaret's voice broke completely. I know. And that's the worst part. I have a granddaughter I've never met, a beautiful child who exists because of my son, and I threw that away. I threw you both away. And now I'm here, desperate and alone, begging for help from the woman I hurt most. Why should I help you? I asked, and my voice was like ice. Give me one good reason why I should spend a single dollar on you after what you did to us. She was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. You shouldn't. There's no good reason. I was terrible to you. I was cruel and heartless and wrong about everything. But I'm asking anyway, because I have nowhere else to go. And because... She looked up at me, mascara running down her face. Because I want to meet her. Emma. Before I die. I want to tell her about her father, about Daniel when he was young. I want her to know that part of her history. That hit me harder than I expected. Emma did deserve to know about Daniel's childhood, about that side of her family. But did that mean letting Margaret into our lives? This woman who had caused so much pain? You want to meet Emma? I asked slowly. After 8 years of pretending she doesn't exist, now you want to play grandmother? I don't expect to play anything, Margaret said quickly. I just want to meet her once, to see her face, to tell her I'm sorry for not being there, to give her the photos and stories I should have shared years ago. That's all. You don't have to let me into your lives. You don't have to forgive me. Just give me one chance to meet my granddaughter and tell her about her father. I felt like I was drowning. This was too much, too fast. The woman who had been my nightmare for 8 years was sitting across from me, broken and begging. And despite everything, despite all the pain and anger, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding that hurt people, and Margaret had been drowning in her own pain. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in my place? I sat back in my chair, my coffee long cold, and stared at Margaret. 8 years of suppressed rage, pain, and unanswered questions bubbled up inside me like a volcano about to erupt. You want to meet Emma? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You want to tell her about Daniel? Where were you when I needed to tell her why her father wasn't there? Where were you when she asked why other kids had grandparents and she didn't? Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. No, you don't get to talk yet. For 8 years I've imagined this conversation. For 8 years I've carried this weight. And now you're going to sit there and listen to every single word. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. This needed to come out. All of it. Do you know what it's like to give birth completely alone? To lie in a hospital bed at 3 a.m. holding your newborn baby and realize that no one in the world cares? I sent you a photo of Emma the day she was born. She had Daniel's eyes, his nose, his little chin. She was a piece of your son, living and breathing and perfect. And you didn't even respond. You saw that photo and felt nothing. Sarah, Margaret tried to interrupt, but I cut her off again. I'm not done. Emma's first smile, her first word, her first steps, every single milestone that should have been celebrated, I faced alone. When she was 2 and got pneumonia, I sat in the emergency room all night with her burning up with fever, terrified she might die, and I had no one to call, no family to lean on, because you decided we weren't worth your time. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I kept going. I worked 3 jobs some months just to keep a roof over our heads. I studied for my nursing degree on 2 hours of sleep. I missed Emma's preschool graduation because I couldn't afford to take off work. Do you understand what you took from us? Not just money, Margaret. You took away the security of family. You took away the safety net that everyone deserves. Margaret was crying too, her whole body shaking. I know. God, Sarah, I know. There's nothing I can say to make it right. You're damn right there isn't, I said, my voice rising. You can't undo 8 years of abandonment with an apology. You can't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I did to deserve such cruelty. You can't give Emma back the grandmother she should have had. I was wrong, Margaret sobbed. I was so consumed by my own pain that I couldn't see anyone else's. Losing Daniel destroyed me. He was my only child, my whole world. When he died, I felt like I died too. And it was easier to blame you than to accept that it was just a terrible, random tragedy. I needed someone to hate because hating kept me from completely falling apart. So you chose to hate me, I said bitterly. The woman your son loved, the mother of his child. You looked at me, pregnant and grieving, and decided I was your enemy. Yes, Margaret admitted, her voice breaking. And I was wrong, so terribly, horribly wrong. I see that now. I wasted 8 years being cruel when I could have been part of something beautiful. I could have watched Emma grow. I could have helped you. I could have honored Daniel's memory by loving the family he left behind. Instead, I destroyed that chance. You did destroy it, I agreed coldly. You had 8 years to fix this. 8 years to show up, to apologize, to be a grandmother. But you only came back when you needed something, when you lost your money and your health failed. That's what hurts the most, Margaret. You're not here because you realized you were wrong. You're here because you're desperate. That's not entirely true, Margaret said. But I could hear the doubt in her own voice. I've been thinking about you and Emma for years. Every birthday, every holiday, I wondered what you were doing, how Emma was growing. But I was too proud to reach out, too ashamed of what I'd done. I kept telling myself it was too late, that you'd never forgive me. So why try? You're right about one thing, I said. It is too late. You can't be Emma's grandmother now. You gave up that right when you threw us away. She's 8 years old, Margaret. She has a life, friends, routines. She's happy. And I've protected her from the truth about you because I didn't want her to grow up knowing she wasn't wanted by her own grandmother. Margaret's face crumpled. She doesn't know about me? Why would I tell her? I asked sharply. What was I supposed to say? You have a grandmother who thinks you're worthless? Your father's mother hates us so much she threw us out when you were still in my womb? No. I've let her believe that Daniel's family was just not in the picture. It's better than knowing the truth. Please, Margaret begged. Please don't keep her from me. I know I don't deserve to meet her. I know I've forfeited every right. But I'm asking anyway. I'm begging you. Let me see her once. Let me look at her face and see my son in her. Let me tell her about Daniel, about his childhood, about how much he would have loved her. Then I'll disappear if that's what you want. But please, give me one chance. I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being wanted to stand up, walk out, and let Margaret feel the same rejection she had given us. But then I thought about Emma, about the questions she would ask someday, about the family history she deserved to know. And I thought about Daniel, about what he would want. He loved his mother, despite her flaws. Would he want me to keep his daughter from her? I need time, I said finally. I need to think about this, about whether meeting you would help Emma or hurt her. Because that's all that matters to me now, what's best for my daughter. Not what you want, not what you need. What's best for her? Margaret nodded desperately. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I have nothing but time now. And the money? I asked bluntly. The medical bills? You said you needed help with that. She looked down at her hands. I shouldn't have mentioned it. I shouldn't have made this about money. That's not why I really called. I panicked. I'm scared, Sarah. I'm sick and alone, and I don't know what to do. For the first time, I saw Margaret as a human being instead of a monster. A scared, broken, elderly woman who had made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it made her real in a way she hadn't been before. I'll think about all of it, I said, standing up. The meeting with Emma, the money, everything. But Margaret, if I do this, if I help you in any way, it won't be because you deserve it. It'll be because I'm a better person than you were to me. Remember that. I walked out of that coffee shop with my heart pounding and my mind racing. The woman who had destroyed my life was now at my mercy. And I had no idea what to do with that power. Share this if you've ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who didn't deserve it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the conversation with Margaret over and over. Emma was asleep in the next room, peaceful and innocent, completely unaware that her grandmother had suddenly reappeared in our lives. What was I supposed to do? Every logical part of me said to walk away, to protect Emma from potential hurt, to let Margaret face her consequences alone. But there was another voice, quieter but persistent, asking me what kind of person I wanted to be. For 3 days, I wrestled with the decision. I talked to Mrs. Chen, who said, "Forgiveness isn't about them, it's about freeing yourself." I talked to Maria from the school pickup group, who said, "Don't let her back in, she'll only hurt you again." Everyone had an opinion, but none of them had lived through what I had. None of them had been thrown out while pregnant. None of them understood the depth of Margaret's cruelty. On the 4th day, I made my decision. I called Margaret and told her to meet me at the same coffee shop. When she arrived, looking even more fragile than before, I could see hope and fear fighting in her eyes. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've made my decision about Emma," I said, "and about your medical bills. But before I tell you, I need you to understand something." Margaret leaned forward, hanging on every word. "You don't get to be her grandmother," I said firmly. "Not now. Maybe not ever. You gave up that right 8 years ago. Emma has a life, and I won't disrupt it by bringing in someone who might disappear again when things get hard. But she does deserve to know about her father's side of the family, so here's what I'll do. I pulled out my phone and showed her photos of Emma. School pictures, birthday parties, her gap-toothed smile, her wearing Daniel's old baseball cap that I'd kept. Margaret's hands trembled as she looked at each one, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She looks just like Daniel when he was that age." "I'll arrange one meeting," I continued. "One afternoon where you can meet Emma, tell her about Daniel's childhood, share photos and stories. But it will be supervised. I'll be there the whole time. And Emma will know the truth, that you haven't been in our lives, but that you want to tell her about her father. After that, if Emma wants to see you again, it will be her choice when she's old enough to make it. Not yours, not mine. Hers." Margaret nodded through her tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I'll make it meaningful for her." "You better," I said coldly. "Because if you hurt my daughter in any way, that will be the last time you ever see her. Understood?" She nodded again, fear and gratitude mixing on her face. "As for your medical bills," I continued, and I saw Margaret tense, "I'm going to help you, but not because you deserve it, not because I've forgiven you. I'm doing it because I refuse to become what you were to me. I refuse to let someone suffer when I have the power to help, even someone who hurt me as badly as you did." I slid an envelope across the table. "This is $3,000. It should cover several months of your medication and some doctor visits. Use it wisely. After this, you're on your own financially. I'm not your retirement plan, and I'm not responsible for fixing your mistakes. But I won't let you die on the street either, because that's not who I am." Margaret stared at the envelope like it was a miracle. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have hoped for." "Don't thank me," I said sharply. "This isn't generosity. This is me drawing a line between your cruelty and my compassion. I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do, not because you earned it. There's a difference." "I understand," Margaret said quietly. "And Sarah, I want you to know, I am truly sorry. I know those words don't fix anything, but they're true. If I could go back and change everything, I would. I'd welcome you into the family with open arms. I'd be at the hospital when Emma was born. I'd help you through those hard years. I'd be the grandmother she deserved. But you can't go back," I said. "None of us can. We have to live with the choices we made. You chose cruelty, and you lost 8 years with your granddaughter. I chose to survive, and I built a beautiful life without you. Those are the facts. Your apology doesn't change them." Margaret looked at me with something like respect. "You're stronger than I ever was. Daniel would be so proud of the woman you've become, the mother you are." That almost broke me. Hearing his name, imagining him proud of me, made tears spring to my eyes. But I blinked them back. I wasn't going to cry in front of her again. "The meeting with Emma will be in 2 weeks," I said, standing up. "I need time to prepare her, to explain who you are and why you haven't been around. And Margaret, when you meet her, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell her you'll be there for her from now on. Just tell her about her father. That's all she needs from you." 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, I brought Emma to a park. Margaret was waiting on a bench, dressed simply, her hands clasped nervously in her lap. Emma held my hand tightly, curious but cautious. I had told her the truth, age-appropriately, that her daddy's mother had been very sad when he died and hadn't been able to be part of our lives, but now wanted to share memories of him with her. "Emma," I said gently, "this is Margaret, your daddy's mother." Margaret's face lit up, but she didn't rush forward. She stayed seated, letting Emma come to her. "Hello, Emma," she said softly. "You're even more beautiful in person than in your photos." Emma looked up at me for reassurance, and I nodded. She took a tentative step forward. "For the next 2 hours, I watched as Margaret showed Emma old photos of Daniel as a boy, told stories about his childhood, his love of baseball, his terrible singing voice, the way he used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Emma laughed and asked questions, and Margaret answered each one with genuine love and warmth. It was bittersweet, watching this woman finally show the kindness she should have shown 8 years ago. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Margaret briefly. "Thank you for telling me about my daddy," she said. "I wish I could have met him." Margaret's voice cracked. "He would have loved you so much, sweetheart. You're everything he dreamed of." We walked away, Emma chattering about everything she'd learned. She didn't ask when she'd see Margaret again, and I didn't offer. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat alone in our living room and finally let myself feel everything. I had done the right thing. I had risen above the cruelty, had shown Emma what it means to be compassionate even when it's hard, had given Margaret a chance she didn't deserve. But I hadn't forgiven her. Not really. Maybe I never would. And that was okay. Forgiveness isn't always necessary for healing. Sometimes the victory is simply in refusing to let someone else's darkness turn you dark too. Margaret had tried to break me 8 years ago. She had failed. I had built a beautiful life, raised an incredible daughter, and become a woman who could face her enemy with strength and dignity. That was my revenge, living well and being better than she ever was. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Emma will want a relationship with Margaret as she gets older. Maybe not. But that will be her choice, made with full knowledge of the truth. As for me, I've closed that chapter. Margaret got her meeting, her chance to make peace. I helped her when she needed it. But I don't owe her anything more. My life, my daughter, my happiness, they're mine. I built them without her, and I'll protect them fiercely. To everyone watching who's ever faced someone who hurt them, who's ever had to decide between revenge and grace, remember this. You don't have to forgive to move forward. You just have to refuse to let their cruelty define you. I won, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet, powerful victory of becoming someone better. And that's something no one can ever take away from me. Like this video, if you understand that true strength isn't about getting even, it's about rising above. Comment and tell me your story. And follow for more real stories about overcoming, surviving, and winning on your own terms. Thank you for being here with me through this journey.